Hello and welcome to Memo Anime Recaps. Do not forget to like and subscribe. Middle schooler Seigi, who has trained in martial arts, is frequently motivated to defend the weaker individuals in his environment. After saving a homeless man from some punks one day, he gets a weird tattoo on his palm from the man. In the arms competition between the United States and the Kingdom of Serbia, the tattoo is a covert weapon. Initially, Seigi doesn't think much of the tattoo, but when a strong girl brutally pursues him to get the power lying underneath that tattoo, Seigi realizes he's in way over his head. Now he's faced with two choices. Will he be able to discover how to activate the power of his tattoo in time, or will his martial arts expertise prove to be insufficient to keep him alive? In the opening scene, a strange girl with white hair is seen pursuing a mobster through the alleyways of the dark city of Japan. After chasing him around and having fun with him, she manages to corner him. The lady pulls out her custom-made pistol, loads it with a white substance appearing from her wrist, and shoots a hole in the man's chest. The man loses his life instantly, and the strange girl leaves quietly. Somewhere around the city, middle schooler Seigi Akatsuka wrestles two brats to save a weird man from getting robbed. Moments after pursuing them away, the man raises his injured head and thanks Seigi for saving him. As a token of his gratitude for sending him away, the man reaches inside his bag and pulls out a translucent material with a tattoo imbibed on it. He places the translucent material on Seigi's hands and waits for it to do its magic. Seigi initially asks the man for some explanation on what the tattoo meant. However, before he can get his answer, the material melts and imprints the tattoo on Seigi's palm. Once the procedure is done, the man gets up and leaves Seigi without any further discussion. The following morning, Seigi races to school with his female friend, Tuko, who is waiting for him. Suddenly, the strange girl from the previous night pulls out of nowhere and punches him to the ground. After realizing what she's done, the lady gets close to Seigi and touches his palm. She feels a weird tingling sensation on her palm and leaves him without saying a word. Seigi spends his entire first period in class checking out the tattoo on his palm, despite his teacher's warnings. Once the first period is over, Seigi's friends find out about the tattoo and ask him about it. Seigi explains the circumstances that led him to get the tattoo and get teased by his friends. One of them speaks up about a weird rumor circulating online. Apparently, there have been talks about someone stealing a secret combat sealing weapon that was designed by the American military force. The person, who looks similar to the man Seigi met the previous day, is known to be handing out free tattoos to innocents and placing them in trouble with the American military force. However, Tuko shows up suddenly and forces him to go shopping with her. Seigi tries to get himself out of this one, but Tuko isn't about to take no for an answer. In the next scene, Seigi and Tuko shop for ingredients to make a super rare curry. While at it, Seigi steps outside to call his grandpa when he finds the strange girl again. This time, the strange girl stole his cell phone and ran away with it. Seigi immediately chases after her to get to her and ends up reaching the scummy parts of the city. The strange girl, who runs as quickly as she can, lures Seigi to an abandoned building. Seigi confronts her and tells her to return his phone so he can get home before it gets dark. However, the strange girl seems more interested in the tattoo on his hand than his idea of getting home fast, and asks him a few questions about his tattoo while fighting him. Seigi plays on the defensive for a little while before eventually changing it and going all out against the girl. Even still, the strange girl still beats the living shit out of him. She pins him down at one point and almost stabs his head to the ground. Thankfully, she didn't and just got up to discuss things normally with Seigi. Seigi gets up and shouts at the girl for being mentally insane. The strange girl, however, admits that she's a little impressed at Seigi's show of strength. So, she shows him her palm tattoo and explains the meaning and importance of such tattoos to its wielder. So, the tattoo works by using the power coming off the charge of the user's special trigger, which could be any object. As for the strange girl, she admits that hers is chalk. While the charge depletes itself, the tattoo is granted the ability to use supernatural powers to bend things to his will. Despite having the look of a teenager, the girl appears to speak as if she's much older than she looks. She then takes out her triggers and shows Seigi her supernatural ability, which is to create explosions in the air. After he meets with her, Seigi returns to his grandpa's dojo and trains with him. His grandpa beats him down and tells him to get stronger than he already is if he truly wants to walk in his father's footsteps. Seigi takes a look at himself one more time and eventually sucks it up. The next day in school, Seigi appears to have a forehead injury as he observes his boring first period. Unknown to him, he was being put under close watch by the strange girl and her handler, Tom, who were spying on him from a cafe near the school. Once she's seen that he's okay, the strange girl, whom her handler calls Izzy, pockets her binoculars and listens to Tom rant on and on about turning Seigi into the army. To cut the story short, Izzy asks Tom to leave Seigi to him as she sips her hot coffee. On his way home that evening, Izzy stalks Seigi's movements and pretends almost as if she wasn't there. She continued her incessant stalking for 3 more days until Tuco couldn't take it anymore. One evening, while going home with Seigi, Tuco loses and confronts Izzy for following Seigi all around town. She throws a fit right there on the road, and Seigi calms her down and urges her to go home while he takes care of the stalker chick. After Tuco's gone, he faces Izzy and asks her to just walk up and talk to him next time. Izzy gets a little gloomy at first, but then again, she sucks it up and talks normally to Seigi. Seigi asks Izzy how she uses her tattoo, thinking he could also activate his tattoo's powers with chalk. Izzy, however, bursts his bubble and tells him that his trigger is going to be different from hers, so she apologizes, but she can't help him out. Seconds later, Tom gets hauled over to their location by a huge guy. Without even wasting any time, the bulky guy lunges at Seigi and uses his tattoo powers against him. Izzy and Tom sit this one out when they discover the huge guy, Wilson, is just a normal member of the LA Mafia who depends on brute force to fight his opponents. He came to Japan to buy tattoos from the Japanese Yakuza and has been beating them up ever since. The fight between Seigi and the sealed Wilson gets heated by the minute, and Seigi knows that if he's to beat this guy, he has to somehow activate the powers in his tattoo. He tries punching the man's chin, but then makes a mistake and leaves himself wide open to the man. Suddenly, the man holds him by the neck and slams his body to the ground. He breaks a few of Seigi's ribs and raises his fist for a final fatal blow. At the last minute, Seigi accidentally activates his tattoo's power and creates a void that instantly takes the big guy out. On seeing this, Izzy gets a little shocked as she never realized she'd find someone who could match the triggerless tattoo in Japan. Seigi passes a few minutes after activating his tattoo's powers and has a dream about a weird tattoo pattern. Suddenly, he jolts back up and finds himself in his room surrounded by Tom and Izzy, who were busy searching his room for incriminating magazines. Seigi throws a fuss and asks the two weirdos what they are doing in his personal space. Tom and Izzy advise Seigi to calm down and clean himself up before talking to them. When he's done doing that, Tom and Izzy introduce themselves as members of the armed forces of the United States. They're currently in Japan to investigate the sealed combat weapons that were stolen from their research lab back in America by a researcher. Now, Izzy and Tom want Seigi to join them in their search for the researcher now that he's been attached to that tattoo forever. Seigi repeats her statement and flat out rejects her offer. Tom explains his new reality to him and tells him he wouldn't have a choice but to join their ranks, or else he may never learn to control his power, which is known to be unstable at first. At this point, Seigi couldn't take it anymore as he wanted to get back to his normal life of being a high school student. He holds Izzy by the neck and threatens to expose them if they don't let him go. Izzy, on the other hand, pins him on the floor and tells him how bad things have gotten for him. She gives him an ultimatum to think about his response to their request and come up with a reasonable answer. If he decides to reject their offer one more time, then he'll be branded as an enemy of the state. They leave Seigi in his room to think thoroughly about his response. The next day in school, Izzy transfers to Seigi's school to keep an eye on him. She introduces herself as Bluesy Fruzy and tells the students to call her Izzy if they want to. Seigi couldn't believe his eyes as he opened his mouth in utter shock. The students, however, were also a little taken by Izzy's long and slender body. Immediately after class that day, all the boys in the classroom flock around her and ask her very innate questions about herself. Izzy, however, points at Seigi to tell them she is only interested in him. This made all the boys so jealous of Seigi that they picked him up and threw him into the swimming pool downstairs. Tuco comes up to Izzy and confronts her for treating her Prince Charming, aka Seigi, in such a harsh manner. Izzy takes one look at Tuco's large chest and fondles them. Seigi climbs back up the classroom and reprimands Izzy for playing with his chick that way. During recess, Seigi takes Izzy to the roof upstairs and asks her why she transferred to his class. Izzy tells him it's to get closer to Izzy so they can protect him easily. Seigi makes a few more comments about Izzy's body and makes her handler Tom come up to say a few things. In the end, they ask Seigi one more time if he is willing to join their ranks and help them catch the tattoo thief. Seigi asks them one more time what their mission about that tattoo was, and Izzy gives him a detailed explanation about the war they're trying to stop, a war between America, their home country, and Serbia, the opposing country that's been rumored to have more knowledge about the sealed combat weapon tech in the recent years. Seigi assesses their intentions and decides to join them in their plight to stop a war between the two countries on the condition that their intentions remain noble. Seems fair enough for Izzy and her handler, so they take their leave. They welcome Seigi to their Team Blue Moon and urge Seigi to be careful around blood, as that is his tattoo's trigger. Seigi gives them puzzled looks as they head back downstairs to continue classes. On their way home, Tom commends Izzy for keeping the truth away from Seigi and even getting him to join their ranks without any hassle. Izzy calls Seigi naive and explains that it's probably best that way, as telling the truth isn't always the right thing to do. Izzy ends their conversation about Seigi by warning Tom never to take Seigi back home, as she fears he may be used as a lab rat back in America, judging by his compatibility with the Voidmaker tattoo. Tom gets a little surprised and teases Izzy for being such a humanitarian and putting a boy she just met before herself. Izzy remains silent, and Tom apologizes for speaking out of touch. As it begins to rain, he excuses himself to continue doing his thing. Somewhere else, a team known as Brahman escorts their leader, who's the princess of the kingdom within Serbia, to take up the throne as they just successfully carry out their coup d'etat to take over the throne. Moments after the princess of the kingdom, Princess Aryabhata, assumes the throne, she instructs the captain of her covert squad, the Brahmin forces, to commence the next stage of the plan. The captain takes off his hat and promises to deliver her enemies accordingly. Arya mouths a few derogatory things about her dad and calls him a fool for thinking peace could reign between Serbia and America. The next day, Seigi follows a poorly written map to get to Team Blue's safe house. On getting to the house labeled as the house, Seigi gets a little nervous and rings the doorbell after being jump-scared by a crow. Initially, Tom thinks he is a newspaper guy, but then again, Seigi reintroduces himself normally and Tom lets him in. What he didn't know was that Tuco followed him to the house to figure out what he'd been doing in secret all this while. As she walks from pole to pole, Tuco faces a very eerie human who stares menacingly at her. The person attacks Tuco and takes over her body. In the meantime, Seigi gets a little lost in the house and receives a call from Izzy, who apologizes for not being home yet. She places him in Tom's hands and urges him to ask any questions he may have about their team to Tom. Shortly afterwards, the home phone rings and Tom sends Seigi to the basement to get some cardboard stuff. While he's gone, he picks up the phone and hears the horrible news about the coup d'etat from his informant. He hangs up the phone and gets a little confused on what to do, but then again, the doorbell rings multiple times and Tom goes over to answer it. Upon opening it, Tuco, who's been possessed by the weird girl from earlier, shows up and slashes holes inside Tom's belly. At the same time, Izzy, who was still in school, is attacked by another member of the Brahmin's forces, who introduces himself as Laka, a single 22-year-old man in search of a girlfriend. He explains his intentions to Izzy and attacks her as wildly as he can. In the end, he rips off Izzy's clothes and leaves only her skirt so he can gaze upon them. Izzy, however, stood firm and got herself ready to fight the weird man. Back at the safe house, Tuco faces Seigi and vows to take the triggerless tattoo, aka Seigi's Voidmaker tattoo, back to Princess Arya. As the weird girl faces Seigi in a deadly 1-versus-1 duel, Tuco's consciousness takes her to the weird girl's memories. In the first memory, Tuco finds herself sitting on the ground in the street. She checks around and finds Princess Arya picking up a street rat that looks like the weird one she encountered earlier. The weird girl, who looked like a stray human, had previously attacked the princess when she asked her to lick her boot. Rather than punish her for trying to injure the predestined princess, Arya takes her in to be one of her own elite forces. She grabs the little girl, Iltutmish, or Il for short, and kisses her to signify her addition to her special squad. Tom wakes up a few seconds after Tuco shows up and begs Seigi to move away. However, when Seigi refuses to back down from the fight, he informs him of the blood transfusion bag in the box near him and tells him to use it as a trigger for his tattoo. Seigi makes a run for the bag, but Tauco kicks it away before he can get to it. Meanwhile, Izzy and Laka continue their showdown in the school building and end up destroying buildings after inflicting injuries on one another. Izzy escapes a near-death blow by compressing air into a stone and forcing it to explode with amazing magnitude. Laka frowns at such a cheap escape tactic and vows to take her down the next time he sees her. Back in the safe house, Seigi holds his own against the all-powerful Il, who kicks him as hard as she can. Nearing the end of their fight, she lands a ghastly hit on Seigi's left shoulder and mouths a few bad words to him before setting her weapon to take him out completely. Tom, who's pretty much still pinned to the floor, extends his hand to reach out for Seigi. Sadly, his body wouldn't let him move. Just when it seems all hope is lost, Tuco's consciousness begins to fight for her body when she realizes what Il's about to do to her Prince Charming. This little gap in time makes Tom regain some of his power. He quickly tells Seigi to pin Tuco's body to the ground while he prepares his own tattoo powers to recover. Seigi thinks on his feet and quickly trips Tuco so Tom can exert his power over her body. Tom also gets up and places his hand on Tuco's head to pull Il out of her. Thankfully, his plan is successful, and Tuco gets her body back to herself. Seigi checks Tuco's body to make sure she isn't hurt anywhere. Then, in a fit of rage, he loses his cool and stands in front of Tom to receive the hit Il wanted to inflict on Tom. He places the tattoo on his hand in the path and makes sure he bleeds through that palm, so his tattoo powers get activated in time. When his black void matter shows up, Seigi uses it to erase half of the safe house in an attempt to take Il out. Unfortunately for him, Il makes it out alive and retreats on orders from the princess. Izzy arrives at the house a few minutes later and finds her entire safe house destroyed. She meets up with Tom and argues over some useless facts with him. While she's at it, Tuco bends to check up on her prince, Seigi, and reprimands him for trying to go out of his way to protect her. Seigi keeps his mouth shut and apologizes for acting out of control earlier. In the next scene, Izzy is seen training Seigi in the basement of their former safe house. As it turns out, Izzy and Tom had built a fully functional training room in the basement of their safe house. Izzy defeats Seigi in their first spar while Tom puts a band-aid on Tuco's head, which apparently already had one of the combat-sealed tattoos there. While he's at it, he rips out his tattoos and stores them for later. Seigi asks him why and how he could do such a thing to his tattoo. Tom tells him it's because his tattoo is more like a synthesized version of the ones they have on different parts of their bodies. As for the ones Seigi and Izzy have, Tom calls them the ancient relics whose art has been lost to history. When it came down to it, Izzy decided to open up a picture of what the last test subject for Seigi's tattoo looked like after the experiment. She wanted Seigi to know how special and dangerous his tattoo was. Seigi gets the message and promises never to use it unsupervised again. Moving on, Izzy mentions a few more important facts Seigi needed to know about his tattoo and getting stronger. Tom gives him a small device he can use to detect a tattoo user near his vicinity. After they're gone, Tom and Izzy talk about their biggest concern at the moment, and that's how they get to know about Seigi and his new power. Tom checked the system and found no signs of an information leak. Tom suggests they get him back to America so he can be protected a little bit more. However, Izzy knew that should never happen, so she left the basement after asking Tom for some time. Meanwhile, Seigi and Tuco run towards their residence. Tuco appreciates being able to share a secret between herself and Seigi. She then mouths a few more things and almost confesses her love for Seigi. When Seigi almost catches on to her words, she gets on her bicycle and races forward and stops at the front, where she meets a cat trying to protect its kittens. Seigi uses the sight as motivation to get stronger and continues running alongside Tuco. Soon after, Il and Laka show up to check up on the kittens there with them. The mother cat brings one of her injured kittens and places it at Il's feet before running away. A few hours later, Izzy visits her supervisor, Lisa, on a shopping trip and endures an hour of teasing by Lisa. After getting what they need for their next job, Lisa takes Izzy to a safe location to ask her why they were attacked. Izzy, who's planned to keep Seigi's identity and power a secret from her superiors, lies to Lisa and tells her not to worry too much about things. Lisa pretends not to know she is lying so she doesn't arouse Izzy's suspicions. In the meantime, Il takes the poor injured kitten home and bathes it before sleeping. The kitten struggles to get off her strong grip, but then Il manages to calm it down before heading to the living room to eat some dinner. Laka, who just finished cooking some dinner, gets a little pissed at the kitten and makes some bad comments about it. Il punishes him for that, but then Laka shows her her new weapon and their next target, which is Lisa, Izzy's supervisor. At that moment, Seigi is seen trying to stop a mobster from stealing a tattoo. He strides graciously through the walls of the high-rise buildings around the asphalt and catches up to the delirious thief. Upon realizing that he's been caught, the thief tries to beat him with a stick, but then Seigi dodges them graciously. Izzy, who was busy overseeing the fight from one of the building tops, captains Seigi and teaches him how to adapt easily to his tattoo's powers in more threatening, real-life scenarios. Seigi takes her advice and ends up taking down the thief with his infamous tattoo drive. After he's done, Izzy commends his tenaciousness and tells him to train harder if he's to win against stronger opponents. Hours later, Il returns the injured kitten from the previous back to its mother in the alleyway, and then hops into the chopper, hovering above her to get to her next destination. In the meantime, Lisa and her subordinates are seen enjoying their pastime in their secret safe house. In just 2 minutes, Il's chopper reaches their safe house. Il uses her tattoo abilities to phase through the roof of the building so she can sneak inside undetected and eliminate as many of Lisa's subordinates as she can before they realize what's happening. Well, her plan works perfectly fine, and she manages to take down all of Lisa's subordinates in one swift movement. After getting all of them, she faces Lisa, who uses her tattoo's powers against her. Elsewhere, Tuco completes her record of making the 3.5-meter-long jump in their school's PE team. While everybody congratulated her and encouraged her hard work, Izzy was busy checking out the tattoo on her head. Just then, she receives an emergency call from Tom to come save Lisa's team. Izzy takes permission from her PE teacher to leave early and activates her tattoo's power. Seigi, who was still in class, sees the small device given earlier and finds out it's reading Izzy's tattoo powers. He excuses himself from class and gets to the roof, where he finds Izzy jumping from building to building to get to Lisa's safe house. In the meantime, Lisa and Il exchange words before their fight. Lisa asks Il how she found her way to their safe house, but then Il is only concerned about Lisa's tattoo ability. Lisa, on the other hand, commends her speed and power to take that many men in such a short time. She then vows never to allow space for Il's exit. Il, who was pretty much obliged to fight her, activates her powers and uses her new weapon to inflict heavy injuries on Lisa's arms. Izzy, while jumping from building to building, comes in contact with Laka's interference device and loses control over her body temporarily, and gets schooled by him for a little while before watching him leave. Seigi shows up seconds later and asks for an answer on why she suddenly left the school in a hurry. While the duo talk and catch up, Lisa finally realizes Ill's special ability. She takes out her gun and shoots a few shots at Ill to draw her close to her. However, when it's done, Lisa activates a bomb and causes a loud bang, which Seigi and Izzy hear nearby. Izzy, who's clearly scared of what's happened to Lisa, begs Seigi to go to the safe house so he can confirm she's okay. Seigi rushes over the building and finds blood everywhere. He gets very serious and gets to the roof of the building to find Ill standing near Lisa's crucified body. As for Izzy, she finds an explosive underneath the roof of the building she was standing in and tries to escape the blast radius. Sadly, her body was still recovering from the gravity-inducing effect of Laka's powers as the bomb blew up. Before fighting Ill, Seigi engages her in a discussion about morals and being a killer for the wrong people. Ill, who doesn't seem to care who she works for, gets up and decides to kill Seigi. Seigi lunges at her, hoping to land a hit before it's too late. Unfortunately for him, Ill pushes him off the roof of the building, and Seigi freefalls until he's caught by Tom. He tries going back to the roof to continue fighting, but it is already too late as Ill and her buddies are already long gone with Lisa. In the next scene, Seigi sneaks back to school and finds Tuko waiting there for him to scold him. She asks him where he's been all this while, but Seigi refuses to tell her. She gets a little pushy and forces Seigi to get a little violent with her. Seigi controls his rage and apologizes for treating her that way before running away. Tuko returns upstairs and spaces out for a bit before she's called back by her other friend who asks her what the matter is. Tuko tells her she got into a fight with Seigi and fears she's now on his bad side. Her friend, however, urges her not to get too worried about that and just focus on getting closer to Seigi. Moments later, Izzy, who apparently survived the explosion, regains control over her body and finds her way to Lisa's former safe house. She finds Lisa's phone and finds out she was recording the entire conversation between herself and Ill back when they were fighting. She plays the recording on the phone and realizes that Ill and her partner, Laka, are taking Lisa to another kingdom to use her. She tosses Tom the phone and tells him to get ready to go rescue Lisa from their enemies. What they didn't know was that Laka and Ill were already patching Lisa up in preparation for the tests they were to carry out on her body. Seigi returns to Izzy's safe house and finds Tuko there. Before he gets to apologize, Tuko ignores it and advises them to go inside. Seigi obeys her words and gets to the basement. There, they find Izzy in her long coat and stop to say hi. Izzy gives Seigi a formal greeting and pins him to the ground before handcuffing him. Then she walks out of the safe house and gets into a vehicle that takes her to Ill's hideout. While she's away, Seigi comes to and asks Tom why he's being held against his will. Tom explains the situation to him and tells Izzy did that to protect him from the enemy as she couldn't risk him being captured by the enemy leader. Tuko asks about her presence there and Tom tells her she's there to provide support for Seigi. Tuko hears this and promises to be by Seigi's side wherever he goes. Seigi finds his resolve and breaks himself out of his cuffs. Then he knocks Tom out and voids out the entire building above the basement so they can escape and find their way to Lisa's location. Later that night, Izzy and her team ready their positions to intercept a vehicle transporting Lisa from Ill's hideout to Princess Arya. Izzy and her people manage to stop the vehicle at the seaport. Laka, who's been itching for a fight, welcomes Izzy and her men to an all-out battle against him and Ill. While the battle goes on, the Princess of Serbia, Arya, finally arrives in Japan on her private jet. She's greeted by one of her female entourages who welcomes her to the country and briefs her on their mission status. Meanwhile, Laka approaches his climax and releases all the pent-up energy inside his body to take down all of Izzy's men. Ill excuses herself to go take down Izzy's men from the back. Laka lets out the full extent of his power and takes down all of Izzy's men in a jiffy. After he's done, Izzy sneaks behind him and shoots his face. On the other side of the port, Ill approaches Izzy's men and takes them all out with her tattoo abilities. While that happens, Seigi and Tuko arrive on the scene in style to stop Ill from getting any closer to defeating the rest of Izzy's men. Seigi bashes a bag of blood and quickly activates his void powers. Then he berates Ill again for killing just for the fun of it. But then again, Ill really doesn't care much about who was ordered to kill as long as stays alive. Enraged, she attacks Seigi with all she's got and pins him into a container. She then walks slowly towards him and raises her sword to take him out. Tom calls Tuko and asks her to give Seigi the receiver so he can tell him something. Tuko tosses the receiver to Seigi and he catches it while dodging Ill's incessant attacks. Tom quickly tells him the weakness of Ill, aka the Schrodinger cat. Since her technique works on the uncertainty principle, all Seigi has to do to beat is to close his eyes and make sure he's no longer an observer of her power. Seigi gets the memo and follows Tom's instructions. However, he gets the shock of his life when he realizes Ill still has control over her powers as she lunges towards him and slices his belly up. Little did Seigi know that Tuko, who is near him, is also an observer, and that was all Ill needed to work her powers out. While Lisa struggles to free herself from her cuffs, Seigi wallows in a pool of his own blood, gets so angry at Il that she immediately throws herself at her and pins her to the wall. Everyone spectating the scene, including Il, is a little shocked at the extent to which Tuco's willpower grants her enough power to push Schrodinger's cat back. Nevertheless, Il still manages to overpower Tuco and knock her out to the ground. While she prepares herself to finish Tuco off, Seigi channels his inner self and listens to the voice of the Void Maker telling him to go a little berserk and negate Il so he can save Tuco. He spots Il raising her blade over Tuco and immediately creates a hole in the ground. This hole causes both Il and Tuco to lose their footing and fall to the sewers. Seigi jumps into the hole and captures Tuco, and at the same punches a hole in Il's stomach to incapacitate her. Il drops to the ground tired and too weak to stand. Seigi raises his fist for the fatal blow, but then he's stopped midway by Il's cat. Seigi bends to have a proper discussion with Seigi, but to everyone's surprise, the Princess of Serbia, Arya, shows up and kisses Seigi's lips in admiration for his compatibility with the triggerless tattoo. After doing such a vile act, she commends Seigi for making someone as ill-minded as Il cry. However, she also mentions that if he'd lost a tad bit more control over his powers, then he may have destroyed both girls. Seigi comes up with more questions than he can ask, but can only watch Arya disappear with her precious Il. In the next scene, Laka continues his 1v1 with Izzy, and actually stands his ground against her. Izzy, on the other hand, kept on dodging all the attacks Laka could possibly throw at her. When she gets it, she calms down and aims a shot at Laka's belly. Then she fires an explosive shot that causes a shockwave from the bullets. Just when she thought she was done with him, Izzy made the mistake of turning her back on Laka. Laka smiles and activates his gravity effect on her body, which pins her body to the ground. As he inches closer to deliver the final blow, Lisa arrives with her men and ends Laka once and for all. Soon after, Arya and Il join Lisa and Izzy to talk a little with them before she withdraws from the fight. Before leaving, however, she shows them the seal of the triggerless tattoo and lets them know just how powerful she is. She disappears shortly afterwards after instructing Seigi to become stronger with the weapon at his disposal. Lisa finds out about Seigi's power and gets pissed at Izzy for keeping things away from her. As punishment for what she did, Lisa was taken to the penitentiary to face trial with Brigadier General Sanders. He metes out her punishment by making her watch over Seigi while he partakes in their tattoo research. Surprised, Izzy is let off the hook and allowed to go scot-free. Elsewhere, Seigi and Tuco accidentally run into Arya and Il on their way out to shop. Tuco takes over and challenges Arya to a ping-pong game, while Seigi does the grocery run. Arya agrees to such a challenge and engages in a deadly game of ping-pong. Tuco plays with all the strength in her body. Sadly, even she was no match for Arya, who not only beats her but also rips out her clothes. Seigi shows up moments later and scolds Tuco for participating in such a weird game. Soon after, Seigi takes Arya to a bench outside somewhere and asks her to tell him everything. For starters, Arya tells him her will, which is to create a world of peace. She leaves shortly afterwards and places BB, her former colleague, in charge of watching over Seigi and making sure he doesn't go astray. BB accepts his new job and gets down to it. The next day, over breakfast at Seigi's place, Izzy explains the plight of the US Army to Seigi and asks if he's going to join their ranks. Even after realizing America will probably use the tattoos to take over the world, Seigi tells her he's not on America's side but theirs. Izzy thanks him and continues eating her breakfast. Elsewhere, Arya wakes up and boards a chopper to travel to her next destination within the city. That evening, BB makes his first meeting with Seigi. Seigi takes him as a threat and tries to take him down, but then BB beats the shite out of him to calm him down and get him to listen to what he has to say. After knocking Seigi out, BB throws him in the passenger seat of his vehicle and drives him to a large facility. On his way there, Seigi's phone receives a call from Izzy, but BB picks it up to talk to her. Izzy, who is busy traveling through the metropolis from building to building, pauses her journey when she hears BB, or Blood's voice, almost as if she just saw a ghost. BB makes his call with her shortly after he promises to return Seigi to her once he's done with her. After driving a few more meters, BB stops in front of the large building and wakes Seigi up. He asks for some information about where he was, and BB explains the nature of the building to him. From the looks of things, they're at one of the largest research centers Era's kingdom has ever built. The researchers inside that building are known for conducting eerie experiments on human beings. After telling him all he wants to hear, BB urges him to get inside the building with him. Seigi stops and asks him why he should follow him. BB mentions that he's a former kingdom member, but then he turned against them when he realized the inhumane experiments being done on the humans there. Now he's back to destroy the building for all it's worth. Seigi reasons with his speech and breaks a hole in the wall. On their way to the inner chambers of the research facility, BB tells Seigi an interesting tale about the Voidmaker tattoo. So, according to the history books, there are about 4 Voidmaker tattoos, and Seigi has one of them on the palm of his hands. BB is also another user of the Voidmaker tattoo, but he has his on his tongue. Just as there are 4 tattoo users, there are also 4 ruins that back the tattoo users up. Till now, only 3 of the ruins have been found and controlled by the opposing countries. If his calculations are right, America has control over just 1 of the ruins, while Arya's kingdom controls 2, and it's said that the Brahmin team is currently in Japan to search for the 4th one. At that moment, Arya, Il, and her vice captain Cal all descend a hole in the ground down to an underground cave in the forest to search for the last ruin and seize control before America does. Bibi and Seigi run into some enemies on their way to the inner chamber, but Bibi quickly takes all of them down without even activating his Voidmaker powers. When he's done, he directs Seigi to the inner chambers of the facility. They find the lunatic who calls himself Mr. Genius waiting there for them. Mr. Genius, whose real name is Karam, displays some of his madness for a few minutes before releasing his makeshift sealed copycats to fight Bibi and Seigi. Bibi gets curious and asks Karam what he did to the poor people. Without remorse, Karam tells Bibi he used the people as guinea pigs and forced their bodies to fuse to the tattoo's nucleus so they could become synthetic hosts for the tattoos and gain similar powers to the real ones. As a failsafe, Karam mentions that he put a bomb in every one of them so that once they're touched, the bombs explode and take out their enemies with them. Bibi identifies all the bombs in the test subjects' bodies and clumps them all up into a bunch before using his powers. In the meantime, Arya and her 2 subordinates make their way through the cave to find the last ruin. Somehow, they all talk about Bibi, the traitor to the kingdom, and Cal promises to crush him with her own bare hands. After packing into a bunch, Bibi makes the enemies come at him so he can use his void powers to create an artificial frequency that not only destroys the bombs but also knocks them unconscious. Karam cannot believe his eyes when he finds out his plans have failed. Bibi wastes no time in breaking into the dummy's small cubicle and placing him under arrest. Manisha, Karam's assistant, tries to protect her master, but Karam isn't going to let her die for him. He blocks her path and begs Bibi to spare them. Bibi, however, knocks them unconscious and waits for the military to arrest them all. When he's done with his mission, he takes Seigi to the mountains so he can be cool like the hero he is. On the other side of Japan, Arya undresses herself after finding the last ruin and begins the fusing process to seize control over the last ruin. In the meantime, Bibi meets with his doctor and gives him an item to use in his research. Apparently, his powers were taking a little longer to recharge, and he needed some tech hidden in a flash drive to help him out. After he visits the doctor's office, Bibi goes over to the riverside and finds Seigi training his abilities there. He joins him and explains a thing or two about the void powers, advising him to make his powers smaller so they can have a larger effect on the affected area. Seigi gets the gist and continues training. Later that evening, Bibi runs into Izzy, who is waiting for him. Izzy gets a little emotional and asks Bibi, or Blood as she called him, why he left the American military program. Bibi ignores her for the greater part, but then Izzy would let him go. She hugs him as tightly as she can and begs him to tell her something she can hold on to. Bibi tells her about the extent of the 4 ruins' strength. If a certain force can have control over all ruins at once, then that person can rewrite the entire world. Izzy gives Bibi a look of concern and then calls him selfish for trying to handle things himself. Bibi ignores her sassy comment and gets away. Hours later, Bibi visits his doctor to get an update on the tattoo rewrite he asked him to do. Sadly, there was still nothing he could do, so Bibi had to wait a little more. The next day, Tuko runs into Seigi's dojo with her nightie on. She finds Seigi sleeping on the floor and gets too close for comfort. Seigi wakes up and Tuko makes Seigi promise never to leave her side ever again. On their way to their first mission, Colonel Sanders briefs Seigi and Tuko on the extremities of the mission at hand. They're to infiltrate the location of the 4th ruin and destroy it before Arya and her people fuse and activate its power. Seigi checks to make sure Sanders has Tuko in mind. Sanders tells him not to worry too much about his friend's safety, as they've already taken that into account. Moving on, Lisa introduces Seigi to all the other members of Team Blue to Seigi and tells them all to fight like a team. Then she moves on to reveal their numbers to Seigi so he can get a better understanding of how the mission goes. When they're done, Sanders gives his men a final speech to fire up their spirits and make sure they're fired up for the fight. Meanwhile, BB finally goes under the needle in his doctor's office. As he undergoes his restorative therapy, his doctor Wiseman discusses the nature of the battle outside. BB gets a little worried and tells Wiseman to get him out of the MRI machine so he can go save Izzy. However, Wiseman advises him to be patient and wait for the procedure to be through, so he can move out with no worries about dying. BB listens to his document and relaxes to finish the procedure. As they approach the mountains, Sanders' team bombards the location of the 4th ruins with bullets from their machine guns. When the firepower gets too much, Seigi tells Sanders to stop. Sanders makes him understand that he's currently at war and he should get comfy with the thought of killing. Moments later, everyone descends from their attack helicopter and takes their positions to ambush the ruins. Captain Johnson, one of the members of Team Blue, gets a little too forward and rushes towards Cal, the vice captain of the Bram Kingdom forces. When he gets close enough, Cal slices him in half and summons the rest of her subordinates to come to face the American military forces. In the meantime, one of the maid soldiers reports the situation outside the ruin to Arya, who is still fusing with the fourth ruin. Arya pauses her procedure and instructs Il to get outside and assist Cal after getting a little power boost from her. Outside, Izzy and her colleagues struggle intermittently to keep up with Cal and her air-slicing attacks. Seigi works with his people and tries to corner Cal. However, he stops at the last moment and decides to pursue Arya. Cal catches up to him and incapacitates him for a little while before returning to continue her fight. The battle became real between Cal's subordinates and the American forces when guns were blazing. Somewhere in between, Il surfaces from the ground and morphs into a giant beast with tremendous power. Unable to control her bloodlust, Il lunges at the attack choppers and starts crashing all of them one by one. Sanders' chopper goes down in a few seconds, but he manages to save Tuco and himself to join the fight. Cal faces him and tries to bring him down with her air slices. However, Sanders dodges all her attacks and sends one of his flying air punches at her. Cal realizes she may be fighting a strong one, so she goes all out on Sanders. Back inside the cave, Arya finally finishes her transformation. Upon getting down and getting dressed, she fondles one of her maid's chests and tells her to go retrieve some of the scattered tattoos for her. As that happens, Sanders manages to land a ghastly hit on Cal's belly. With Izzy's help, he decompresses the density of the air and traps Cal in an airlock. However, Cal got herself out of it in time and sent flying blade slices that cut Sanders' right hand and leg. The same attack completely incapacitates Izzy's hand. Unable to do anything, Izzy backs a tree and waits for Cal's blade to put her out of her misery. Just when all hope seems lost, BB shows up on his bike and saves Izzy. Sanders and Izzy couldn't believe their eyes, as they never thought he'd come for them. BB exchanges a few words with Cal, and then finds out that all the charade is a trap to bring him to the ruins so they can take his tattoo's power. Arya, after finishing her transformation, gets outside and finds Seigi lying on the floor. She picks him up and pins him to an earthy wall with one of her pincers. Before rendering his limbs useless, she mentions her true intentions, which is to use the power of the four ruins to rewrite the world of tattoos and make herself the supreme ruler of all. As for BB, all she has to do is wait for him to exhaust all his energy and die out so she can retrieve his tattoo without having to fight him at all. Seigi tries to speak against her wishes, but then Arya stabs him before he can speak out. A few meters away, BB makes Cal blush by confronting her about her feelings for him. Cal initially gets so embarrassed that she denies her love for BB, but then BB breaks her heart when he holds Izzy dear and tells her she's the owner of his heart. Cal gets very pissed at BB and tries to end him in a single hit. However, BB blocks the hit and gets himself ready to end Cal. Moments before the fight begins, Izzy has a flashback of one of the times she got to be alone with BB. That day, BB held her hand to look at her tattoos and asked if she hated tattoos. Izzy let him know back then that it didn't really matter since she's been forced to get accustomed to using the tattoos. Wiseman, after sending BB to battle, thinks about the nanomachines he installed in BB's system and hopes they hold out long enough for BB's power to last against Cal. As their great fight begins, BB and Cal send both voids and air slicers towards each other. Lisa, on the other hand, takes out one of her pursuers and goes to check up on Colonel Sanders, only to realize he's barely hanging on to dear life. Without any remorse, she phones Burns and makes him interim captain, while Sanders gets the medical care he needs. After relaying the information, she rushes towards Cal and BB, wondering what BB could be doing there. In the meantime, Burns dishes out a few orders to his soldiers to get a number of the soldiers remaining on the battlefield. He witnesses Il, who's still in her beast form, slices one of their soldiers in half and quickly orders them to retreat before they all get eaten alive. He places Tuco in Tom's hands and urges him to take her as far away from there as humanly possible. As she escapes the forest, Tuco thinks about Seigi and wishes he was okay. Seigi, however, struggles to get himself out of the constraints Arya placed on his limbs. Arya laughs at him and calls him a key to her success. When Seigi asks a few more questions, she prefers to keep shut. As Cal and BB continue their fight, Tuco heads back into the battleground to go search for Seigi. Tom tries to follow her, but his tattoo's copy effects run out, and he's left stranded. In the meantime, Burns and Lisa remain the only force standing against the beast Il's become. They fist bump together and decide to work towards ending Il. BB, on the other hand, manages to slice off Cal's katana, and this makes her rage so bad that she decides to use her ultimate attack to end BB. Although BB manages to dodge most of them, the little one that touched him dealt considerable damage to his limbs. As for Lisa and Burns, Il doesn't go easy on them as well, and she tries every attack in her book to take both of them out. At one point in the fight, when the duo thought they'd trapped the beast, Il attacks. Burns takes the hit and sacrifices himself in an explosion to save Lisa. Meanwhile, Izzy hides behind a rock nearby and tries to sneak up on Arya. Arya, who saw her coming, attacks her and crucifies her on one of her earthy materials. That instant, BB crashes onto the ground in front of them with one of his limbs missing. He gets up and begs his source to grant him the little power he has left, so he can take Cal down. Thankfully, his source listened to him, and BB gets his missing limb in no time. Before fighting, Arya mentions her plans to Seigi again and advises him to just give up on trying to stop her. Seigi, however, wasn't ready to yield to Arya's wishes as he shouted at her and urged her to stop whatever she was doing. BB and Cal go for round 2, but this time, BB's considerably weak, so he gets the short end of the stick. In the heat of the moment, Seigi begs his source to grant him power to beat the princess. His source listens to him, and Seigi gets enough power to break through the princess's constraints. He assists BB in his fight, and helps him take Cal down in a large and explosive shockwave. Seconds after his enemy, Cal's down, BB's source grows out of his body to eat him up. Before he's completely covered in his own source, BB begs Seigi to eat him up so he doesn't go to waste. Seigi gets emotional and begins to mouth some soy boy words as he's scared of eating his hero. Arya tries to stop them, but then Sanders comes at the right time to create a diversion and buy Seigi enough time to consume BB and his source. In the end, Seigi ate BB's source and became a little bit stronger than before. He stays on the ground and stares into nothingness as Tuco runs towards him. Before he could call her name, Il shows up from behind and eats Tuco up. Moments later, Il returns to her normal human form and walks to her master. Arya realizes their mission is complete, so she creates a protective barrier to ensure the fourth ruin is protected. Seigi and his people manage to escape Arya and are sent to Wiseman's lab. There, Seigi sits patiently and waits for Wiseman to show up and discuss their next move. Wiseman explains the reason why Il's source didn't take over her soul back then in the fight between America and the Arya. Then he begins his speech to Seigi with a smile on his face and apologizes for bringing Seigi into such a world. Izzy shows up with just one arm and threatens to end Wiseman if care isn't taken. Wiseman keeps his cool and commends Izzy's way of life, calling her a strong woman. Izzy, who doesn't seem to care about his compliments, still holds the knife against him and asks him to tell her what BB's aim is. To her surprise, Wiseman bursts her bubble and tells her BB has always been working towards destroying the tattoos and ridding the world of them. However, what happened to BB on the battlefield was unfortunate, and there's no telling that it won't happen to Seigi as well now that he's inherited a little of BB's power. Before they continue fighting, however, Wiseman tells Seigi to step into his animus-looking pod so he can take a look at BB's memories while he's at it. In one of the memories, he finds BB sparring with Cal on his first day joining the Brahmin team. While holding his end against the strong swordswoman, the king of the kingdom approaches his daughter, Arya, who was busy watching over them back then, and asks if she can trust someone like BB, who used to be with the American military forces, to join their ranks. Arya tells her father not to worry too much about BB betraying them, as he's provided pretty solid secrets about the American army. Even if he has something sinister planned, she knows what to do to get her. After his spar with Cal, Ajita, the captain of the Brahmin forces, shows up and welcomes BB to the team. Soon after, Varma, another one of the Brahmin's forces, shows up and personally welcomes BB to the team. Then Arya arrives and gives BB her own welcome to the team. As a token of her gratitude for the secrets, she gives BB the triggerless tattoo and continues doing his thing. Shortly afterwards, BB excuses himself and chills out somewhere around to check the blueprints of the building. While he does his research in one of the little houses there, he opens the door and finds Cal changing there. He allows Cal to finish changing and then engages her in a little discussion. Cal gives him a little warning about the do's and don'ts of the team. That night, BB is seen atop a hill spectating useful vantage points for his attack. Apparently, he's there as a double agent to uncover the secrets of the sealed tattoos so he can destroy them. While he's at it, BB hears a rustle in one of the bushes nearby and finds Varma there. He attacks him and pins him on the ground for questioning. After drilling him with his questions, BB finds out Varma is a spy the king sent to check up on his daughter while she does her thing. Varma also realizes BB's true identity, but then promises to keep it a secret as long as they can work together. BB asks Varma a few questions about the palace and the research facility. At that instant, Ganesha, one of the most insane creatures from Arya, shows up and attacks them. BB creates an opening for Varma to escape while he fights Ganesha. Ganesha stabs his side with her earthy sword and sends him flying several meters away from her. BB checks himself and heals himself up. Then he rushes over to the king's castle and finds Varma there with him. Varma speaks highly of BB and asks the king to let him work with him. The king assesses BB's intentions and welcomes him on board. However, BB needs some clarification first. He tells the king about Arya's plot to overthrow him and have the throne for herself. The king, however, got defensive and ordered BB to get out of his room. On his way back to his quarters, BB runs into Arya, who invites him to come on a mission with her and Cal. BB goes on his first mission as a Brahmin operative and works with Cal to take down the enemies. Cal gets a little worried about BB when she realizes he is hesitant to kill his former comrades. BB makes her know about his policy of sparing both sinners and saints and leaving their punishment to a higher power. Cal scoffs and kills the enemy with her sword before heading back inside. One night, he demonstrates his power to Varma and informs him of their plan to infiltrate Samsara, aka Arya's hideout that night. Before leaving, however, BB asks Varma why the king was so defensive when he asked him about Arya. Varma explains the king's feelings of love towards Arya to BB and hopes he understands. Thankfully, he does and tells Varma to believe more in the future. Just then, Ganesha attacks them again, and BB counters and destroys her tattoo with his Voidmaker power, with Varma's help. After he's done, his vision gets a little blurry. However, he still refused to abandon his mission. He punches a hole into the wall and gets to the inner chamber of Arya and her sister's playroom. On getting there, Varma gets a little shocked to see many Aryas playing around the room. To their surprise, however, one of the Arya sisters introduces her sisters to both of them and takes them on a little tour of the facility. She shows them in their control room thousands of pods containing all of Arya's clones. BB gets a little curious and asks a few questions about the clones. Arya pauses the questions and decides to tell him the history of the clones. 35 years ago, the king of their kingdom committed mass murder and the extinction of a clan when he made it his life's mission to create a tool with immense power like Arya. Back then, he would gather multitudes of people and operate on them like lab rats just to create a single organism like Arya. One of BB's is activated and he captures a few sisters. Then he burns some of the information on the system in a flash drive and escapes the facility. Arya gets wind of this and orders Cal to go stop BB at all costs. Cal catches up to BB somewhere in the woods and ends up killing Varma. BB escaped the fight and took Varma home to the king to confront the inhumane man. Apparently, when the Control Arya found out about her father's crimes, she made it her life's mission to rewrite the world and save the lives of the 3,000 people her devilish father wiped out. After realizing he's been caught, Arya's father succumbs to the pressure and explains everything to BB. Rather than turn his back on him, BB actually swears to protect the king from his dangerous daughter as he knows Arya is a much more dangerous threat than he originally thought her to be. The king sucks it up and shows BB a secret railway to get away from the palace so he can get to Arya's hideout without being seen and protect the nation and its people. BB takes the secret train and eventually gets to a port. There, he faces ill and takes her down before coming face to face with Cal, who goes all out on his ass. BB manages to create some barrier between himself and Cal as he rushes towards controlling Arya's location. On his way there, BB realizes just how stupid he was to think he was a true hero. Before he knows it, the captain's intangible prison wraps itself around BB and engulfs him. With little to no time left before he's pulverized to pieces, BB slips out of the intangible prison and escapes. Control Arya shows up a little while later and shoots one of her void laser beams at a ship that just left the port. After missing her target, she instructs Cal, her subordinate, to find and eliminate BB by any means necessary. BB surfaces in the water and hangs on to the ship to ride it to his next destination. After relieving such a memory, Seigi finds himself in limbo alongside BB. He lets out his emotions to tell BB how hard life is going to get from now on for him. BB talks to him in a calm voice and lets him know that he's going to be there for him every step of the way. Fast forward to a few months later, former members of Team Blue now live in the woods away from civilization and Arya's forces. One day while fishing, Izzy and Seigi, who's now grown a lot stronger in the past months, meet and talk about BB, the princess, and Wiseman. Izzy was worried about Wiseman's hidden agenda and was under the impression that he was going to betray them at some point. Seigi, however, urges her not to worry too much about things like that he's got it covered. That night after training, Seigi and the remaining members of Team Blue eat a weird protein-rich diet. Izzy complains a little about having worms for dinner, but then again, Tama, her colleague, teases her a little and forces some of the worms into her mouth. Izzy throws a fit and attacks him. After eating, Seigi and his people move on to train in the woods. This time, Seigi beats them all and passes his training with flying colors. When they get back, Izzy receives a call from HQ informing them that they've been found by Arya and her people. Izzy checks around and finds a CD with the word letter written on it. She takes it to HQ for analysis and they run it through their systems. The next day, Seigi and Izzy get to HQ to hear the information on the CD. Wiseman tries to discourage them from seeing the video, but then again, Seigi tells him to cut the bullcrap and let them see the video. After playing the video, Izzy and the others realize that Arya's keeping Lisa alive, and that she's going to be invading the Grand Canyon in America to seize control of the fourth ruin. Seigi asks Wiseman to mobilize the men so they can all go and stop Arya from taking over the Grand Canyon. However, Wiseman advises they wait for the virus he planted in Seigi's tattoo to fully activate itself. This way, if Arya happens to seize control of the ruin and tries to use Seigi's tattoo to release it, then they can rest assured that the virus will sabotage the entire thing and destroy Arya along with the ruin. Seigi still tries to counter his thought process, but then Wiseman asks him to think about what Bibi would have done in this situation. It was at that moment that Izzy stood and spoke for Bibi. If Bibi were to be there with them, then he would immediately go to save Lisa without thinking twice. Izzy points her gun at Wiseman and tells him to mobilize the American troops so they can save Lisa before Arya kills her. Wiseman succumbs to her wishes and tells them to start getting ready to leave for America. While the others prepare themselves, Tama heads out to see his special person, Yumi, who currently works as a cosplayer for a manga company. He finds her in the midst of her people and promises to marry her if he ever returns from America. At this point, Yumi gets a little scared of what may happen to her man overseas. Tama urges her not to worry too much about her and just wait for her hero to get back from saving the world again. After all the shenanigans, Team Blue flies to the Grand Canyon to join Sanders and his people there. One evening, while doing normal scouts, the captain of the Brahmin group, Ajita, shows up and threatens to take down Sanders and his forces. Minutes after they arrive at the canyon, Izzy and her entire team start fighting. Seigi clears a pathway through the ravines and runs into Laka and his partner. Seigi and the others spectate Laka and his partner take down the poor soldiers and realize they have to do something quickly or they fail. Izzy jumps down from the hill she was at and attacks Laka's partner, only to find out that she's actually Lisa. Tama makes sure to save some of the soldiers from being mashed potatoes and ends up knocking them out after they complain to him. He rushes forward and comes face to face with Lisa. He introduces himself to the best of his abilities but is then interrupted by a blabbermouth that Lisa blew out of proportion. The two exchange a few more insulting words towards each other before fighting each other. She gets a little more serious than she normally is and promises to deal considerable damage to Laka's talkative ass. Meanwhile, Ajita and his killer bees face the attack choppers and take down a good bunch of them. While that happens, Cal infiltrates the American base and takes out their commander. As she's about to take Sanders out, Arya shows up and tells her to keep calm and leave Sanders alive so they have someone they can clown when this is all over. Seigi, on the other hand, figures out where the ruin is in the canyon and drills a hole in the underground cave with his Voidmaker before descending to the ruin. There, he finds Cal and fights her with his might after realizing that the princess is already inside it. Cal lets him know it's almost physically impossible to destroy such a thing. Seigi lets a little fragment of Bibi's source take over him so his body can regenerate after disastrous hits. He mouths a few derogatory things to Cal and begins fighting her. On the other hand, Tama uses his sealed power to enhance his strength to fight one of Laka's partners. All the while, Izzy holds up her own against Laka and ends up getting trapped with her teammates, Lawrence and Tony. She dishes out a few more orders for them to follow and rushes towards Lisa to take her down. Laka faces Tony and Lawrence and gets a tough beating on both of them. Izzy, on the other hand, breaks Lisa's swords and knocks the Schrodinger's cat out of Lisa's body. Moments after her victory over Ill, she hears Lawrence and Tony's screams as Laka uses his wire strings to cut their insides. Laka takes out Lawrence and gets himself ready to take Tony down. Just then, Izzy shows up and shoots a venomous bullet at Laka, which ends up poisoning him in the process. On the other side of the battlefield, Tama manages to pin another one of Laka's partners to the wall. The lady creates spines from the inside and surrounds herself with them. Tama strengthens his muscles and prepares himself to end the lady. However, Izzy throws Laka at the lady, and Tama ends up taking both of them out. In the meantime, Seigi keeps his end against the lady, but every now and then, he gets injured. At one point in the fight, he stops and asks Cal how she can support someone like Arya, who is trying so hard to become a deity. Cal gives him an explanation of the link between Arya and her sisters, and makes sure not to omit the fact that her being a deity will bring the best things to them. After the explanation, Seigi realizes that Arya will lose herself if she's successful. As such, he feels very sorry for her. As Cal charges at him, he stops her and tells her he'll never let someone like Arya win the human race. He steals one of her swords and uses it against her. When it comes down to it, Cal decides to go all out on Seigi. She takes off some of her clothes, thanks Seigi for letting her get the chance to use her strongest attack, and takes her stance. She confronts Seigi to come at her, and Seigi takes one deep breath before charging at her. He takes several hits from Cal and allows Bibi's soul to guide him while at it. Then when he sees the opening, he punches Cal and knocks her out. In her final moments before going unconscious, Cal sees Bibi and curses him for being so far away from her. Moments later, Arya shows up fully transformed as she just absorbed all of the ruin's power. Seigi is well aware that everything he's been training for all boils down to this fight, so he amasses as much void energy as he can and shoots some blasts at Arya. Arya, who's already mastered how to control the pure energy of the fuses, gracefully dodges and counters all of Seigi's attacks. She puts Seigi on the defense and leaves no opening for Seigi to take advantage of. When the time is ready, Arya expands her power to form a giant. While at it, she gives Seigi a small lecture on the psychology behind the weak and strong. Meanwhile, her team captain, Ajita, loses the aerial fight with the choppers and decides to self-destruct. He enlarges his seal into a large mass and creates a massive crater in the ground to destroy everyone there. Izzy and the others wait for the explosion to be over. Then they get down the crater and find Sanders lying down near a wall. After checking up on him and making sure he's okay, Izzy and the others remaining all rush towards Seigi, hoping to get there and save him before Arya destroys him completely. On her way there, Izzy takes another look at her family picture and wishes she never had to come back to the same place where she lost every one of them. However, duty calls now, and there's nothing she can do but accept its call and save the world's only hope. In the meantime, Seigi struggles to keep up against Arya's strong powers. While giving him a lecture about altruism and selflessness, Arya punctures his belly and stabs him in the back with her earth pincers. She talks about the infectious species of the world, which are the humans, and tells him she's doing the world a favor by cleansing her of her infection. Then she creates a hole in the ground and punches Seigi to the lower level. Izzy, Tom, and Tama arrive that instant and tend to Seigi's wounds. Seigi begs his colleagues to let him go to avenge Tuco's death, but Izzy and Tama aren't ready to let him do anything rash. They leave him in Tom's hands and face the princess herself. Tom carries Seigi towards Colonel Sanders and asks him for help. Meanwhile, Arya sits on her throne and calmly attacks Tama and Izzy. Izzy manages to get close to Arya and throw her from her throne. Sadly for Izzy, however, she's heavily injured and is knocked unconscious. Arya, however, sustains a little injury on her hand. This makes her so irritated that she collapses the cave to completely kill Izzy and Tama. Once she's done with them, she floats to the surface and faces Sanders and his choppers. Inside the chopper, Sanders tells his men about the nuke he has placed somewhere in the Grand Canyon. He tells his men to be ready to make the ultimate sacrifice to prevent Arya from achieving her goals. When it comes down to it, Sanders presses the button to activate the nuke, but then nothing happens. The realization makes him lose his mind as he screams like a clown in the chopper. Tired of the facade, Seigi jumps off the chopper and catches Izzy on his way down to the ground. As he descends towards the ground level, Arya materializes her source and makes it into a giant megazord. She tries to eat Seigi up in the air with one of her heads. However, Seigi's source ate its way through the mouth and saved Seigi and Izzy. Wiseman, who was watching everything on his big screen, pressed a weird remote in his hand and activated the virus which he slipped into Seigi's drink. The virus in turn poisons Arya's Megazord and causes Seigi to materialize his source to turn into his own Megazord. As he transforms himself into his Megazord, the poison starts affecting Arya and her sisters through the link she formed with Seigi when she kissed him back then. Nevertheless, Arya's Megazord still manages to pulverize Seigi's Megazord. As the beating takes place, Seigi gets into a trance and realizes just how wrong things are going for him. Tom shouts his name and tells him to get back up and fight for the 7 billion people whose hopes and wishes rest in his hands. Upon hearing this, Seigi gets back up and breaks the jaw of Arya's Megazord. While all that happens, Izzy wakes up in a trance and finds Bibi there. She runs into his arms, seeking comfort, and hugs him. In the outside world, Seigi regains control of his Megazord and turns the tide of the battle on his side. He apologizes to everyone he's ever betrayed, including Tuco, and asks for their strength in this final fight between himself and the boss in front of him. Then, in one fluid motion, Seigi controls his Megazord to beat down each and every inch of Arya's Megazord. Elsewhere, the eldest one of the sisters manipulates the systems and makes herself get the headaches of all her sisters so they can all be saved. The fight continues on the battlefield as Seigi keeps on pummeling Arya and her Megazord to pulp up until his final blow. With the fate of the entire world in his hands, Seigi takes a final stride towards victory and blasts Arya's Megazord into nothingness. Then, as the dust settled, every American force could see Seigi as the last man standing. They chant their country's name and a victory cry to commemorate the hero called Seigi, who rescued their country from imminent destruction. At this point, we have reached the end of our video. If you like it, do not forget to put the like button and subscribe for more new videos.